Okay, we are starting. Welcome everyone. I can't tell you how grateful I am to see all of you here again. We had a big break, but we are glad to be back. And I'm very glad, especially that I see both new faces and also familiar faces I know from previous meetups. So we were not dead in the meantime either, but we mostly collaborated with Android Worldwide. I want to give a shout out to them. It's basically a group of meetup groups who organizes meetups online. We partnered with a bunch of groups from multiple countries, and we are holding a whole day meetups from time to time. I don't know from the top of my head when will be the next one, but keep a lookout for the Android Budapest meetup page. We will definitely announce it. In the meantime, this is this year's first in-person meetup for Android Budapest. Thank you. The topic for today, and also this is a special occasion because we won't have presentations as usual. We usually had bi-monthly presentations, but now this will be a roundtable discussion. This is now also the third one, so we did two others previously. We do one per year, and we will welcome a very great panel of experts. I will introduce them shortly, and we will discuss mobile security, focusing on Android. The topic is near and dear to my heart. Basically, one of the reasons why I joined LastPass, the company I work for, and also one of our sponsors today. This office is officially for GoTo. Basically, before it was Logbein, the company separated into GoTo and LastPass. So let's talk about sponsors then first. I'm really grateful that we can be here in this great location, with this great view. LastPass sponsors are food and drinks. They provide, if you don't know, the password management from anywhere. Well, life is happening online. Work, play, family, and friends. LastPass puts your digital life at your fingertips, simply and securely. So go beyond saving password with the best password manager. Generate strong passwords and store them in a secure vault. Now with a single sign-on and adaptive MFA solutions that integrate over 1,200 apps. Thank you, LastPass, again for sponsoring the food and drinks. Also, I would like to thank GoTo for the office space. The company provides tools for collaboration and communication, and also remote access and support. They help people and businesses do their best work, simply and securely from everywhere. Today, work and life are intertwined. At GoTo, they like to think yourself as your GoTo. The development of remote access and support products are primarily based here in Hungary, with extensive engineering products, UX team presence, and collaboration. So thanks again for the sponsors. As I said, this is Android Budapest, if you didn't know. I'm Balázs Gerlei. I'm your humble host for today. I work here, as I said before, working on the password manager application. Now I would like to introduce our panel of experts. I would like to start with my dear colleague, Adam Tospod. He currently works as a senior security engineer here at LastPass. He's a proud member of the AllSafe team, and my dear colleague, as I said. If I have any security questions, I know that he is the person to go to. And also, he has a haircut I'm still jealous of. So please welcome Adam Tospod. Okay, next up, Norbert Baliga. He has been working at GoTo as a security architect, where he's mainly responsible for running the application security program to make sure that security controls are incorporated into all phases of the development lifecycle. He has also offensive security background. Before GoTo, he worked as a penetration tester and security consultant for multiple companies, conducting a wide range of security assessments. For a period of time, he had led the mobile application security testing projects at Deloitte, where he had to deal with real-world mobile security vulnerabilities daily. So please welcome Norbert. Next up, Mario Kadar. He started his security career 5 years ago at Deloitte as pen tester, where one of his main focus was testing mobile applications, surprise, including Android and iOS applications. Currently, Mario works at Diligent as an application security engineer, where his role also covers mobile application security. So welcome, Mario. Okay, Zsombor Kovács, next one. He describes himself simply as IT security geek. However, he's a security specialist with around 12 years of hands-on experience in practical security. testing, conducting penetration tests on a daily basis. So he has been working for a variety of companies. Currently, he's Chief Research Officer at MRG Affitas. Previously, he has laid in the cold mud at 2 a.m. with constable-sized Jagnetten, trying to find a wireless network beside the German natural gas distribution center. He has run in suit from an assortment of security guards after failed social engineering attempts. At one glorious occasion, hope to hear about this. He has talked himself into the VIP section of the Emirates Stadium in London, and also to this meetup. From now on, his main focus is Android malware and all the badness that can happen on your beloved corporate smartphone. He's also a keen dog picker. Welcome, John Bohr. Last but definitely not least, my friend Tamás Balog, a return speaker or return panelist for this roundtable discussion. He's an Android engineer at TopTap, where he builds the app used by top freelancers around the globe. He started crafting Android apps when the target SDK version was still a single digit. Since then, he was involved in building applications for various fields, including security critical ones, like mobile finance. He had been teaching Android development for several years, and help teams as consultants as well. He's passionate about coding, loves tinkering with tech, and is interested in how things work under the hood. And also enjoys discussing these with a good coffee. So please welcome Tamás as well. Okay, so we will have conversation in two parts. First we'll focus on the state of mobile security, and for the second phase or section, after a short break, we will also dissect real-world security incidents. We prepared a great selection of questions, but anytime you have one, raise your hand and you can ask it. Our panel is happy to answer your questions anytime as well. So let's get started. Well, I think it's not surprising if I say that hacking is so commonplace nowadays. Basically, every time you hear something. Meanwhile, we have these mobile devices on our pockets, and we put more and more personal data on them. And at least I definitely have the feeling that security is not a first focus for every mobile developer group. So, do you agree with this? Do you think that is true? And how they can evolve? How we can basically fix it, or what we can do for developer teams? Who would like to start?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I'm not actively in the mobile application penetration testing now, but still facing mobile applications time to time. And I'm surprised that actually not much changed, especially in the security area. I mean, the same security surfacing time to time. And it's I cannot answer the question why. So it's definitely I don't hold the truth for that. But definitely now APIs, web applications are more focused on securing, having restrictions on the API endpoint. So developers are more and more aware of these security vulnerabilities. They are taught, they are having trainings and all of these things. We are focusing, training them to be able to develop secure code. And especially mobile applications, it's hard because you don't only have to be able to write good code in your chosen language, but you have to be also aware of the security implications and the security issues on the platform itself. So it's not only knowing the programming language, but also knowing the platform that you are developing for. Probably that's the challenge for the developers. They're not suited for yet. So I would definitely say that, yeah, it's still a problem, and definitely there are rooms for improvements.
Yeah, well, let's ask a developer, so Tomasz.
Well, I might have a different experience because I like the other guys. I'm not a security expert, but I just thought about that I think I've never been to an interview, neither as an interviewee, I mean a candidate or an interviewer, where security was even mentioned. So I think at least for non-security experts, it has much less emphasis, I think. That probably might be because most of the projects I worked on were not that security critical. Probably if I would work for LastPass, I guess then the interview would
Iron.
have yeah. So I guess they having a much larger emphasis on that. But I wouldn't say that it's not important for developers, or it's not an important aspect. We put, I think, compared to how not that security critical our app is, the TopTal app, we put quite much emphasis on that, especially during code reviews. I think, at least for us, I think that's the most effective ways to catch security issues. At least I can recall a couple of cases when I submitted a pull request and some other developer pointed out that, hey, have you considered this case? Have you thought about the security implication of this? Yeah.
Jean-Paul, dare I say you are more on the attacker side, or at least the researching side. How do you see this topic? Do you think we are basically developers making the same mistakes as in the web or backend for 10 or 15 years, or do you think it's not that bad for this situation?
Well, it's hard to make a direct comparison in terms of is it worse or better. Yeah. But if we talk about problems and issues, I see that there are issues, there are problems. And I usually do developer trainings when we try to teach developers how to avoid common mistakes within their Android and iOS apps. And as it turns out, the root of the problem I see is the mentality. So that when you are a developer, I mean, not necessarily you guys, because you're apparently attending an Android security team meetup, so you're in this term better than the rest of the bunch. However, the way things usually work from a mindset point of view is that developers want to reach results as quickly and smoothly as possible without too much mental effort. And as it turns out, like most of the more seasoned developers I met, the more receipts they have in their hand, like the way they build apps, the way they build APIs, or if they work on smaller segments of the code, how they create objects and classes and that kind of stuff. However, in many cases, in order to choose the right solution for the right problem, you have to intimately know how Android works under the hood, what Google offers you as a developer, what are the APIs you should use, and you should probably avoid common mistakes which come from earlier experience, because the platform is in constant development. So now we have CryptoKit for the most part. So there's a lot of, and Jetpack, I think that's the name of the package there. So Google is trying to make the platform as easily usable for developers as possible. But as it turns out that in many cases, the problem is not in an actual bug in the code, but the fundamental problem with the design. So I had a chance to review the case studies we will talk about in part 2, and we will have a few good laughs on. I mean, come on, this had to be a bad idea from day one.
Yeah. Actually, that's a great segue. I think that this is basically a shared responsibility. So we have multiple stakeholders here. One is the developer, of course, who develops the application, but then there's the platform owner, Google, and such. And also we have the backend most of the time. So maybe we can say that if the backend is not secure, we cannot do anything to make it better. But not shifting blame for sure. Just I really wanted to ask your perspective on this. So where's the responsibility starts and ends with the developer? Also considering that I think, as you already alluded to, kind of that I think last time I checked, still on the OS mobile top 10 vulnerabilities is the platform misuse. So basically, when you are not correctly configuring the components that you were given by Google. So I would like to ask Adam about this first. So how do you think, where's the responsibility starts and ends for mobile developers?
Can I add a little bit to that conversation?
Sure, of course.
Because what I think is a really good point that developers don't really have the time to think about security, because for companies it was not really, they didn't invest actually into it. But actually we have threat modeling sessions with actually mobile developers as well. And it's pretty good to see that if we sit down and we talk about threats, they are the one who came up with actually real bugs. So what I see is if you have the time to actually think about what can go wrong, actually, yeah, you can fix a lot of things.
One thing that you mentioned is a false assumption that application is not so important. Why should I care about security? Lots of developers have this assumption. They don't think about, actually, that's a personal device with lots of personal data. Your application exposing those data to actual attackers, and you don't think about it. You just, I wrote a notepad application. What can go wrong? If I offer a function that you could use to install an application using my app.
I would like to argue a bit because for example, do we want to secure, for example, weather applications from modifying the settings of it from outside by privileged access, like with the root access? So there's definitely, I think, a place where you stop, because you can make the weather app the most secure you want, but I don't think you are better off. But there's truth, of course, in what you say, that there are many cases that you're not thinking first.
Yeah. It's good that you have time and sit down and think through the threats. That's the first step, yeah.
So you would also develop a weather application with high-level security? That's your mindset. I'm really curious.
Yeah, that would be a really short thread discussion, I guess.
Yes,
But
yes.
there should be any.
Okay, yeah, of course. And just connecting to the threat modeling session, it's really fun. We play card games, so really. Yeah, so back to the question I actually asked. You avoided answering it, but
Yeah.
no problem. So I would pass the question to Mario. So Mario, in your opinion, where does the responsibility end for mobile developers in this
Well, I would say that mobile development has not matured like web has. I mean, web has been around for like 30 or almost 40 years now, and mobile is widespread for like 10 years, probably at this point. And yeah, I would say that developers should be responsible for the things they develop. But yeah, I mean, are they really responsible for things on your phone? I mean, are they responsible for the physical security, that you leave your phone unattended or anything? I mean, yeah, until the network and the application itself is secured, that's as far as responsibility goes.
I see. Okay. So there's also, I think, particularities for mobile applications. Like, for example, for desktop environments, I vividly remember that it was said before that if you have physical access, then it's game over for the desktop. But for mobile, this is quite different. You already touched on it. So, what do you think? What does this change in mindsets or something like that? Anyone of you?
I mean, yeah, it's easier to steal a phone than a laptop. I will argue, but
Even more easy than steal a big computer.
yeah, but yeah,
So mainframe.
you would have to think about like, are these devices secured by a pin? Are you requiring a pin to be set? Like, that's the first line of defense, I would say. And yeah, while you can implement root detection and things like that, I think you're still just basically trusting a client with anything that it communicates back. And yeah, it's I don't think that it's entirely possible to make sure that the client is trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. So basically saying that shifting the code towards backend where you have the...
Yeah, I would say that you would have to fix the backend first and then think about application security.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what does biometrics change? Does it change anything, do you think? Or is it still avoidable, bypassable? What are the considerations when using biometrics? I know you have something to add for sure. At least I heard you talk about that. But any of you would like to add?
I think it's a topic that's really controversial. I mean, lots of people say that biometrics is a bad thing. No, I think it's convenient. Definitely, that's why it's widespread, right? It's again, we can do something more secure, but more useless. So we have to draw a line where actually we decide what we kind of like to get instead of security. From privacy perspective was a concern. Yeah, like you are giving away your biometrics. If someone able to steal those kind of data belonging to your fingerprint, that could be also exploited. But I believe that in this environment, when actually the phone is close to you and every day you open your phone hundreds of times, there is no better solution yet for authentication and authorization perspective. So I believe that it's something that is still usable and gives at least some level of security. And as I said, I'm not recent with the most implementation, but I'm aware of that at least some dedicated hardware components are inside the devices, trusted environments, execution environments, where actually the encryption happens in a really secure environment, dedicated cryptographic process. So actually that improved a lot in the way how it was back in the old days. So now definitely these dedicated hardwares make a much better job than before it happened only virtually. So it's a good thing to use, I think.
I would like to really touch something that you kind of alluded to and also hear your opinions about it. But I would like to highlight that you have to use it. So there's the biometric and also the separated engine, but you have to use it because, for example, just asking for the biometric and asking whether it was provided or not, I think is not secure enough. So you actually need to encrypt something with it to get it. So maybe you have a better way to explain this.
Yeah,
More?
so the thing is that talking about biometrics, it's not a universal solution, it's not a silver bullet. So applications can suck from a security perspective even if they have biometrics enabled and they actively use it. For instance, not many developers know that in Android API point of view, there was quite a few changes how you can use biometrics. And there's one sacred way when it's not bypassable, any other way can be bypassed. So even if your user sees that, okay, you should touch your phone or show your face or whichever biometric implementation the particular device uses, then developers had to get it right. So just by using biometrics, that's not a guarantee for everything. Issue number one. Issue number two, Google has had a troubled history with hardware vendors. So they wanted to gain as much market traction as possible. So literally anyone who had a CNC machine back at home was able to produce a phone which was Android certified back in the day. And those devices were locking trusted execution environment, the hardware AES chip, like the secure enclave. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that in this for this audience. I'm not sure.
It seems you are not.
Okay, looks, this was the sorry, sir. So the other people have the secure enclave, and now Android has Google has mandated if you want to have like a hardware compatibility badge for Android, as a manufacturer you have to provide a trusted execution environment, basically a crypto chip on your device, which should be responsible for instance, handling biometrics. If your device is older than that and it doesn't have that crypto chip, then unfortunately you're out of luck, because if your device is rooted, there are ways to implement authentication in a secure way, but you have to really, really be careful and really creative when discussing. So more often than not, we see problems in applications in that regard. There's a question?
You've mentioned that all devices had all kinds of problems related to security. What's the oldest device you would be comfortable using from a security point of view?
An old Nokia phone. So you meant seriously? Okay, was the latest? You know, I think the Google Pixel line, that should be okay. Like, I'm not that.
I don't know if you know he works at Google.
Too bad for you. Sorry, talking home. So the problem is that you have to have the trusted execution environment. Like back in the day, Samsung, LG, Sony, whenever, like, this was not a mandatory thing. The Samsung came up with Knox, LG came up with some other stuff which no one really used, And Sony did the same, and for some bizarre reason, they charged you for using the API, which was an absolute no-brainer. So literally, if you wanted to create a secure app which uses the trusted hardware-based crypto module, you had to have a Sony version, a Samsung version, an RG version, and something for the rest of the people. So that was apparently not going to happen. So I wouldn't consider these solutions as these ideas as real solutions. So I would use any device which has now the trusted execution environment. I'm not sure what's its name currently in Google's terms, but basically that's that.
Yeah, I do remember, for example, before the biometric prompt in Android X, there have to be different implementation, even just requiring the fingerprint. So that was fun. Anyway, okay. Something else you would like to add, any of you, before I move on?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about this, I think an important thing is that you can do this securely. You can authenticate on the phone, and you can use the key store, but in the end, you have to fall back to something if it's not working. So if your PIN code is 1234, then you can add a new fingerprint. And that's the point when actually you have to fall back to something. And that's actually, again, where you can fall back to the server, the backend. Then you have to authenticate again, probably with your credentials, like your username and password. This is the tough part again.
It always go back to password. We will have a question about that, but maybe we can move it on. But I'm still like to ask if anything else you would like to add on to this topic. No. Okay, then let's move it to the password stuff, because I think it's an important thing. You already touched on password is at the end of everything. So if you forget something, then it's password. So, but recently I think there were some big movement in this area. I would like to mention the Fido Alliance and also Apple Passkeys. I know it's another meetup, but still, I think it's an important thing to mention, because I think that
Credit where credit is due.
and also I think there's just it's just a question of time when Google needs to come up with something with that. But also, Apple Passkeys. Let's talk about Apple Passkeys a little bit first. Let's get the bad things out of the door first. So, yeah, it's an interesting solution. I don't know if you are familiar with it, all of you, but it's basically aims kind of to replace passwords by using this generated passkey to log in. But it's saved with the Apple ID, and if you forget it, you can still get to it with the Apple ID password. So at the end, it's still password. So my question is really, is there a way to avoid it? Because there are some complicated passwords are not really secure. We all know that, I think, because even if you specify like a complicated scheme, you have to say still password 123 with a $signs and also password again. It's still not safe, but it satisfies most of the requirements. So what do you think? What's the future? Is there anything better than a password, or are we stuck with it forever? At least as a fallback.
Just one thing to add to this, that in the end of the day, you would like to use your device, right? So if you don't have any fallback options, then you are out of your device, and no one would like that. So in the end of the day, even we will have a better solution. I mean, if we dramatically, the conception won't change how we authenticate the people, we will always fall back the password-like authentication, even with these new tokens, keys, pass, biometrics, behavior, because now AI can detect that you are you, because you move in the way. But in the end of the day, if this locks you out, you have to get back to the device. How you can back to the device if that new solution doesn't work? We have the password, so we will let you know.
And support, of course.
Yeah.
Who can reset the password?
The weakest chain.
Yeah, the weakest.
Yeah, so that's something that I don't believe won't change soon, even if we'll come up with a better solution and more secure solution. Usability. We will use these services, these devices.
That's true. That's true. Anything else?
When we talk about Apple Passkeys, actually, I think the general idea behind the entire concept is that you don't have to set up a password for every site, even if you can have your password manager generate a new random long password for each of those. There are plenty of those on the market.
Yeah. But only one good.
So the thing is that so if you were like a security conscious user and you were using LastPass, for instance,
Sure, of course.
on your, as an add-on in your browser, then virtually the Apple Passkeys will not really give too much for you. Just you will depend more on Apple as a vendor, because as you said, it will be all stuck to your iCloud account, and for some bizarre reason Apple decides to shut you off from your iCloud account, then you're unfortunately out of luck. But as things stand, I think this is a way better solution for people who notoriously use password 123 as their password, and you would be surprised how many corporate workstations, when we do pen testing and red teaming and that kind of those kind of assignments, password 123 with a capital P is still a valid choice.
Of course. Maybe
The choice of
dollar
the
sign
frames.
for the S because it requires.
Yeah,
symbol, but-
depending on your like the shift one, whichever country you work in, whichever keyboard layout they have, shift one.
Yeah.
Is
That's good, yeah. Okay. Also, one thing with biometrics, going back for a bit, I think there's still a problem, and I'm actually curious. What do you think about this? Is that you cannot really say whose biometrics is it. So you add the biometrics to the device, but it can be your relative. And I think it's a very useful or widely used use case that you add your spouse, for example, with the biometrics, and then you have like finance applications, banking applications, where they are kind of requiring as a way of not just authentication but signing, that you are there. But you start with this problem, because I think there's a way to at least try to solve it from the vendor's perspective, at least but there's currently no implemented way to say that biometrics belongs to who. What do you think about this? Is it a problem at all? Do we need to think about this? How can we think about this? Maybe Tomasz, do you have an idea about this from a developer side?
I never really considered adding my spouse biometrics to my phone. I don't think at the phone level you can prevent it. You can even, I don't know, cut someone's finger and keep it and use this as an authentication. It can't really
Keep it in your pocket.
prevent you from
Second factor.
No, they will have 9 more fingers to
Yeah.
use.
Sure.
yeah, so they can log in their device and log you out. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see a market of not only selling your kidneys, but your
Yeah,
fingers. The YubiKey alternative, and there's this opportunity there. Okay. Back to more. Mario, maybe? How do you see this?
Well, yeah, I would imagine that there could have been conflicts rising from this, that you have your spouse added to your phone and they will just unlock your banking and just see what you're spending all of the money on. And yeah, it could be a problem, but so far I haven't seen any application where you can just simply say that you will accept these fingerprints and these not. So yeah.
I vividly remember in
I mean,
some banking applications some discussion about this in the press, I think, or somewhere, that this is a problem because the some kind of standard required them to be sure that who is present is the person of the account holder.
I mean, this.
I don't somehow they say they solved it, because nowadays I don't see this. Every banking app has
Probably change the requirements.
Maybe.
I mean, yeah, this goes back to what I was saying, that yeah, the mobile security has not matured. So this is still like a theoretical question among us. Like, I would say that this will be something that will be present in pretty much every application in the future. But at the moment, yeah, I'm not sure if anything uses it.
Okay, we heard a lot, so let's start. Let's have a 5-minute break so everyone can stretch their legs, and then we'll get back with this part 1, but so 5-minute breaks. Okay, so still with the part 1, let's continue. We discussed different kind of authentication, and I think it was briefly mentioned, but we haven't talked about second factors and other factors. What do you think about that? How does this come to the picture in mobile side? Would like to take it?
Well, I'll be the one then. So when we talk about two-factor authentication, as I see, applications and companies trying to offer or trying to use 2FA in applications provided for their users who are not the mass public, like normal people. They tend to use SMS, which is probably the worst feasible, because up until this January, you could just walk up to any shop of a mobile service provider with like a forged piece of paper and said, hey, that's me, and I please give me a SIM card for this phone number, and they gave you a SIM card for that phone number. And apparently that policy has significantly changed. Now I think, as far as I know, they won't give you a SIM card unless the other one is turned off. So if the SIM card, the original one, is still alive and active somewhere in the world, then they just refuse to give it to you. So that's one of the key problems with the practical use of 2FA. So that the SMS version is that can be circumvented. So
Yeah, that's a crazy thing. I heard about SIM swapping. It's there are places where they are criminal groups who are actually going into stores and stealing the tablets of the store manager and swapping quickly the SIM. So
heist of the century.
yeah, so interesting stuff. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
There's a couple of Darknet Diaries episodes. So if
I heard that.
you're into that, I think, I'm not sure which one it is, but if you Google, you will find it. There are 2 or 3 episodes exactly about SIM swapping and the activities of criminal groups who target people with really thick crypto wallets.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool story. So
Yeah, and this
Check
Darknet
it out.
Diaries, it's a podcast. I think we can give a shout out because it's really great. So.
yep.
Other stuff, if not SMS, what's the safe way to do FA?
That
You know,
will-
we have this
that
kind of
will
hardware
never-
stuff, but it's very hard.
Never happen. You know.
Yeah, I cannot see people bringing along these kind of keys everywhere. So yeah.
No, that's not going to happen. That's my opinion. I'm probably too pessimistic, but SMS 2FA is because most banks, most websites just require it for some reason, but not something that people actually understand why it's beneficial for them. So I don't expect too much change in that regard.
Adam, maybe your opinion on this?
I mean, actually, MFA and mobiles is a really tricky topic because most of the times, even if you have an authenticated application, it will be on the same device. Probably you will have your email open, so probably you can recover your account anyway. And in the other hand, you can use your YubiKey or anything with your laptop, but come on, who will carry with them and use it to the phone? It's like painful. So yeah, probably the best way is if you have an authenticator app, which is use some strong authentication, then it may be a little bit harder to break. But yeah, on mobile, 2-factor is like pretty hard.
That will require some piece of specialized malware to steal your 2FA tokens.
Yeah.
It's always funny for me when the application is on the same device because come on, we are all doing this. So
Why pretend? It's really cool when the application just realizes that it has SMS permissions and says, "Hey, we have this is the 2FA. Can I just put it?"
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Any other thoughts?
I mean, for me, it was kind of a surprise that how we shifted, from the second channel, which is, assuring that, if I have a compromised device or compromised application, I have another channel which is totally separate from that, so I can assure that, at least you have a chance to not a compromised device using the same authentication process. They shifted actually the second channel into the same application. So now even not a separate application on the same device, but into the same application. Banking apps now doing like everything inside of their apps. So what if I found an exploit in it? Then actually I bypass everything, authentication, MFA, and everything. And again, falling back to the usability, people won't use anything else because that's convenient. That's what they have to use 100 times a day.
Okay, so we are doomed. Okay, so on that note, let's talk about something more interesting and happier. So, libraries, we all use them, I think. Although I was at an interview once when they basically said that when I talked about Google libraries, that we don't use that. We have our own implementation because we don't want to rely on other third-party code. So everything, no dependency, and it was especially a downside that I dare to mention on Redux. Anyway. using libraries involves inherent risks. So you are putting different developer or developers' code in your own application. And we actually seen this being exploited even for hacktivism, with recent armed conflicts, like doing hacktivism and putting some code that executes in a certain country. And also actual malicious acts. I remember, for example, I think maybe Tamás should remember because I think it was when we were both at Outsoft. There was an article when basically you could have replaced a real dependency with a malicious one by uploading it to a different repository that was superseding the other one, the real one. And then you just found that there's some malicious code in it. So what can you do with this? It's kind of supply chain attack. What developers should be aware of in this regard.
So this topic actually goes beyond mobile security, and probably it's a bigger issue in JavaScript right now because they are like using only npm packages for everything. But it's still an issue in mobile as well. But this is where probably I can say is you should use well-maintained libraries. You should use security tools that actually helps you to figure out issues in the application, in the libraries, and you try to keep them up to date. What I always say is like wait like a week at least before updating it, because that's kind of the time when, if something happens, someone tampered the library, then maybe enough time to the community to figure out. So, but
also I think don't be the biggest user of the library. It's always beneficial if someone bigger uses it, because then problems can come up. But would you go as far as, for example, reviewing changes in a dependency?
I mean, you won't have time for that.
That's true.
Come on. But this is why we have the tools and the a lot of issues which are actually accessible for everyone. So actually, you can even Google a lot of issues with open source libraries.
Tamás?
Yeah. So in this particular case, actually, if you could have reviewed the whole sources of the library, the issue was that you didn't get that binary, that built library artifact that was built from the code that you would see on GitHub. There was someone in between who modified it, and because I think the issue was that the dependency repositories was configured in a way that probably Bintray had much higher
I think it was
preference.
JSON.
Yeah, I thought that's the same. Never mind. So it had higher priority, and
at least how most of the code was configured. I think it was just a practice how developers put them in the code.
Yeah. And someone realized that that provider don't have this package, so they modified one and uploaded it with the same name, and that repository had much weaker security requirements. Actually, I think was the reason why people were using it, because alternatives like Maven Central, it's much harder to publish something there, and that was actually a benefit of this of the tool, that it is much easier to publish libraries there, and we see where it ended up. So to prevent that, I would suggest to not use anything else than Maven Central and Google repositories. And if you were really worried about it, there are tools that can check the hash of the library binaries. I think it was called Gradle Witness that can generate it for you when you add the dependency. When you say that, okay, I'm sure that this is the binary that I trust, you can generate it, add it to your build Gradle, and every time you rebuild it, it will check if it was modified. But in this case, it wouldn't help either, because if Bintray was configured first, then you would generate the hash of the malicious jar or AAR, and you would every time check that you have the proper malicious code. So,
Which is a plus.
Yeah, which is a plus. Yes. But you were right. No one has the time, I think, to check every library, especially every update. Mm-hmm. I just noticed recently we introduced Dependabot at GitHub, which open PRs for new versions when they are published. And since then, we have like 2 or 3 PRs every day with new versions. and it's impossible to review every change for every library, for every version.
Stick with the old ones, the obsolete ones, which are deprecated.
Yes, yes, and you cannot publish apps to the Play Store with some deprecated ones. Like, yeah, yeah, we just run into such an issue that we were using an old library, even with these approaches, and Google Play detected that we were using this older one, and it has a security issue, so we had to submit a new APK with a newer one. Yeah.
Mario, maybe?
Yeah, I would agree with the guys that there are many great tools out there that can be used to basically monitor all of the dependencies that you use, including Dependabot. There's also Snyk and many other great tools that you can use. It already has a pretty strong database of pretty much every vulnerability that is present within a dependency. And yeah, I wouldn't say that someone should take their time and just check every change made to a third-party library. And yeah, I think that development should start incorporating these tools actively.
Sure. Norby, I think you have thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, lots of things have been said, but just summarizing it, don't write your own code. It's that level of complexity, that level of sophistication that we have today, it's not feasible. And even if you think that you could write a better code, you cannot. So actually, there are lots of people working on these things that you have to put a level of trust into these libraries. It's not feasible to write your own code for everything. The second thing, as mentioned, these things will happen. These hacks can happen every time. Libraries can become malicious. They can be injected malicious code inside of it. What you can do is closely watching, monitoring your code, your pipeline, because actually, even if you just reviewing your source code repository, it doesn't mean that you can catch those things, because what if someone into the build pipeline can do something malicious? In the end of the day, the end result, the artifactory will be malicious, and you cannot catch from the source code. So each phase of your development lifecycle in the CI/CD pipeline, you have to have these guardrails monitoring these vulnerabilities, and hope that you will catch in time those things and you react as much as possible. So automation is the key here, because the pace of the rapid development, we cannot manually follow these the speed light, and it's just automation that can resolve these things.
Okay, so the takeaway is don't write code.
Yeah, don't write your own code.
Yeah, don't write your code,
Yes,
of course.
just
Write someone else's code, and then that's not
just
your best responsibility.
pull in the libraries that has your business rules,
Yeah.
and we are done.
Compile your own GCC.
And I mean, for dependencies, typo squatting has been a problem for quite some time now. So I would say that, yeah, before writing an app, just check that you're using the correct libraries. So yeah.
Okay, so rounding up the first part. Does anyone have any questions from the audience? Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to reflect on something that was said earlier, that the difference between us and web development was that they had decades to mature. So my perspective on this is that there is a fundamental difference between what they have to build on and what we have to build on. Is that their tools and technologies, I think, are more of open standards, open source projects vetted by lots of people. Our fundamentals and our platform is two operating systems, essentially, built by two private companies, with the driving force to sell consumer networks. And the yearly forced upgrade cycle.
And that.
Pressure, NS, yes. So, considering, would you agree with this? And considering this, do you think that even if we get a decade or two from now, will we ever get to a mature, better point, or will we be always worse off because of this?
So I will just very quickly repeat the main question for the recording. So will we reach at any point maturity? And it just also compared to web, where there are some open standards and not private companies between the platforms. So will we reach maturity?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it, and yeah, I would agree that mobile has it much more easier than web had it. like, yeah, you have already the building blocks that web paved out basically, and I'm pessimistic on the other side. I would say that within a decade, I would say the overall posture would be much better.
I just want to say that actually I believe that if we can build general security awareness, security mindset, people will have somehow incorporated into their everyday processes, the way how they work. It doesn't matter what type of vulnerability or what type of platform we are building on. If you always have this question in your mind, is it good what I'm doing? Why is it not good? Is there anything better that I could do? This general mindset, if you have, I believe, it doesn't matter if you are a web developer or a mobile developer, you will be able to be better and develop secure code. That's the first point that you have to take, building that mindset. After that, you can learn everything. That platform-specific vulnerability, that, I don't know, new technology, new standards, you will nurture.
Any other thoughts? Jumper, maybe?
No.
Well said.
Well, no, we won't.
Okay, that's a great closing
I
thought anyway.
agree on
So
that.
that's a great closing thought anyway. So we will stop here and we will have a break and we will continue. I think quarter before.
In 10 minutes, basically.
Yeah, 10 minutes break. Yeah. So stretch your legs, enjoy the food.
Cheers.
So, for the second part, this will be the meat of it, the case studies. But before that, I would like to give a shout out to Hacktivism, John Boy's meetup. If you're interested in more security topics, then look them up. They are on meetup as well. So that's a great one. So the second part, we will look into real-world scenarios, and let's get to it because time's flying. So let's start with an Amazon Photos application. There's basically, it was quite a recent hack this year, I think in August maybe. Basically, access tokens were stolen, and they were stolen in a really tricky way. Basically, it was found by a research firm, and they started by discovering several minor vulnerabilities or problem security issues, basically misconfigured components of the application. For example, one of the activities that was not supposed to, it was exported, meaning that other applications can start it. And they also had an intent filter, basically allowing other applications to call it with a payload. And long story short, it at the end launched a request or fired a network request. And with a well-crafted intent, you can say or ask that application to call your API. And that API call contained in the header, the access token. So you could still steal the access token in a really tricky way. And this is where strange things start, because it was really multifaceted. There were multiple vulnerabilities in the backend side as well, because it allowed, with this access token, it allowed not only querying user photos, but the research firm discovered that this same token is used with the Amazon Drive, basically their Dropbox competitor. And you could not only access the photos, but also every file that is stored in the user's Amazon photos. And that's not the worst either, because at the end they get into a really tricky cloud-based ransomware attack as well, because they also found an undocumented API where you can not only query these files, but also write them, even with erasing the history as well. So you could have just encrypted the user's file, replaced the user's file, the encrypted ones as it was a ransomware attack. So I think there are multiple takeaways in this. So let's dissect it. Who would like to start?
I think I'd like to start with the exported component stuff, because I think this is a really good example that, in one hand, this is a very Android specific thing that you have an exported, it was an activity. But on the other hand, this is actually the same old thing. This is an input validation issue, because this is the same old issue, because what happened is, anyone could send you an intent with a special extra, and boom, things happen. So actually you have to think the same as in the web and everywhere. Like, so do I actually really need this? So do I have to export it? If I have to, maybe do I have to use my other application? Like, you can use the signature permission for this, so you can actually restrict it as well. And if you really need it, then you really have to think about what can go wrong, because and if you export a component, then anything can happen, and you really have to be careful that what kind of input actually comes here.
I think also interesting to add that only recently Google requires this exported flag to be set explicitly. Before that, there were some tricky situations where you set some stuff. I don't want to go into details, but you set some other stuff, and the component became exported.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting thing, because first, how Android built up, you actually had to use this exported true or false. But after a point, they decided to actually not delete it, because you could always use it, but no one used it. And yeah, if you had an intent, that it became immediately exported, and actually no one actually know it. And now, actually, it's recently just now they actually.
At least now it's a requirement also
yeah,
for the
it
Play
is,
Store to
yeah.
upload. So now you have to do this. Jumbo, maybe from attacker side, what does it tell you?
Yeah, so I think I do not envy you, Android developer guys. Seriously, I feel sorry for you in many cases, because Google is messing up critical points in your applications big way. Like, right? So far, this was the intent filter thing. So you put an intent filter on an activity, then it became implicitly exported.
Yep.
And literally think about, like, you have something, the logic, you have something which is not exported, and you put a filter on it to diminish the attack surface, and it becomes exported. So that's one thing. Returning to this app, I'm not sure if this was intentional, because I would not be surprised if this was a deliberate design choice within the app. Because more often than not, when we find similar issues in applications, it turns out that, oh yeah, we use this app in this way. Like, we have a couple of apps which communicate, but they have different URLs to communicate, and I will have to pass the URL as a parameter to the intent as an extra. So what's wrong with that? So I would be really interested in what the background was, because I just read the story. And it's not really published whether or not this was like a bug or a feature. So I would not be surprised if this was a feature in the first place.
Yeah. Tomasz, maybe? Your takeaways?
I just briefly checked it before today's meetup, but I recall that the intent filter were actually designed to open deep links. And I think if it was designed to open deep links, it was intentional to get exported, because otherwise you couldn't open links. And I think they didn't actually stole the authentication token. They intentionally used the app as an authentication provider. So if you open a deep link through the application, it adds your authentication token. So your app actually authenticates the request, and that's why you can open certain pages via the app that you would.
That's brilliant design choice. Amazing.
I'm just saying that I don't
Elevated
think
privileges to a caller.
I just saying, and I don't think it was by accident exported.
Yeah, I think so.
Things that could help with this accidental exporting is, I think you mentioned CI tools that can check. For instance, there's a tool, how it's called, that can diff the result APK, and this diff is posted in the CI. We use this tool. I just can't recall that name. It diffs the end result, the APK, and post the diff. So when we review code, we immediately see if someone introduced a new APK. And even if in the application source code it's not exported, in the built APK file, it will be either exported true or false when they merge the manifest. So you can catch things like that. But it can help with unnecessary permissions, even if it's like not a dangerous permission, but any kind of permission that not require users to allow that, or simply just introducing like a malicious library that would introduce something into your application. Like libraries can contribute to your manifest in the merge phase. They can introduce new activities or broadcast receivers, anything, and you can catch that with them.
Yeah, I think it's very important to touch on again that input validation. I think that's the key here, because even if you export this functionality, it's quite common. For example, I wrote down some other examples of the TikTok attack. It's quite recent. Microsoft discovered it, I think, last month or maybe something like that. The attack behaved different. There was also JavaScript misuse. So basically, the web view was configured to allow JavaScript code to call into Java code. So that's also a great
That's a great design pattern, everyone. Use that.
Yeah, but also the attack pattern was the same, so deep link handling. So you could the same old thing. So you could ask the TikTok app to open a web page, basically.
You know, I'm really grateful for the TikTok guys, because when we do these developer trainings, there's a heated discussion about web views. So that's the end of the second day. So that's pretty much everyone's pretty tired by that time. But they still have the energy to talk about web views.
I just broke my ankle.
You know, the thing is that when we discuss the security settings of a web view object, and there is this bridge between JavaScript and Java, and they have the same stuff in iOS with the Objective-C runtime you can hook into, and I'm always asking, okay, why would anyone ever use this? And now we have finally an example for that. Great.
Yeah, other thoughts on this?
I think even besides the security implications, it's usually not a good idea to rely directly on the input of the deep links. For instance, internally in our app, we use deep links to navigate inside the app, but we intentionally don't use the same links that that we support as deep links, but we always parse it, map them, and if something shouldn't come, then we even log it, so we are aware if someone tries to open odd links.
Yeah, so there is a similar vulnerability in web applications like open redirect issues. So it's like, if you know where you should redirect the user, you should map where you should not rely on the actual input itself, because that could something be wrong and could be redirected. And with deep links, the same. If you have a deep link that actually intentionally is something that you would like to redirect your user into some other part of the application, which in the way, if it's an untrusted input and you use that input as a logic, that's something that you cannot check if it's correct or not. So that's where static analysis tools, unorganized tools even cannot help you. That cannot detect, because it actually depends on the logic that you implement there.
I think threat modeling can help a little bit if you correctly map out where the inputs, right?
Yeah.
And I would like to ask the audience, do you have any questions for this case study?
There was a question, yeah.
Sorry, thank you for going.
I had the other question, but I answered that one for myself. But the thought
You can come up here if you want.
Yeah. The thought on WebView was, so do you think with all this possibility of mess ups in WebViews, open redirects, and so on, do Android, iOS developers also need to learn web security?
Definitely. As I said, general security mindset, like
Yeah, but open redirect is like a very specific
it's not
mess
input
up,
validation.
URL specification.
Open redirect is a lack of input validation issue. So if you're aware of input validation, then every time when you develop a feature, a function, where you suppose something comes from the user, which is controlled by the user, this is the key question is here. This is controlled by someone, then I don't rely on that input. I map somehow into specific cases, or I somehow make logic that I control, not the input controls the logic itself. So that's the basic idea here, the input validation. It doesn't matter it's XSS, SQL injection, open redirect, nothing. These are just different types of places where the input validation issue emerges.
I think I recall you saying in your training that basically when you start using a WebView, it's a common problem that other developers basically just don't know web development. and they should,
Yeah.
because like there are a lot of problems. Once you start using a web view, you have to get to delve into it. I do remember, for example, the breakout issue. That's also a fun one when you could break out to Google somehow with help support page or something, and you can just show any kind of web page in the application.
Yeah, so I was working for a bank at the time, and as it turned out, a funny person in the US posted a picture, a screenshot on Twitter with the bank's app with Pornhub in the middle, and said thank you, hashtag the name for including porn in your banking app. And it turned out that they had a web view which was supposed to show the ATMs on a Google map inlay, and you can figure out the rest.
Okay, any other question to this? Okay, let's move on. I really like this example. This is a fintech example, and I think that's there at least security should be quite fundamental, and it is often, but still, you can even sometimes see the Edam cheese, sorry, something Hungarian. So Edam cheese aligning, the holes aligning, and you can get straight through. So there was an example in 2016, so it's not that recent, but I think it's a good example to show multiple things. It was the N26 app, Berlin-based neobank. If you haven't heard about this, there's actually a good CCC talk about this. And by the way, we will post all the links for the meetup page, so you can look these incidents up. Of course, the panelists had the opportunity to look them up beforehand, but don't worry, if you don't catch something, you can look them up. So there's a talk about this, a YouTube talk, and it was really multifaceted. First of all, there was a man-in-the-middle attack, how you can basically replace the server, the real server, and get between the application and the real server and steal the information. Now, you would ask, well, is there any HTTPS in there? Yes, it was, but there was no certificate pinning. I think we can start with this and go into more details later because there was other stuff as well, but I think this is a divisive topic. Certificate pinning. Is it a good idea? Is it not a good idea? How you could exploit it? Before going to it, I just briefly mentioned for someone who maybe don't know, certificate pinning is basically saying the one or the list of trusted certificate and only allow that one, even if the device says that the request comes from a allowed certificate, you won't trust it. You only trust the certificates that you pin to your application. There are multiple ways to pin it. I don't want to go into details now. If you want, you can, but this is the gist of it. So the downside of it is if the certificate expires, for example, then your application cannot connect to your server anyway. And we do know that publishing an update is not just like that for mobile devices. So that in and of itself can be a security problem, I think, that your apps can't reach the real server because you forgot to extend the certificate or replace it. And it happens. I think it happened for Microsoft, everyone. So it happens. So what's your thoughts on it? Would like to start? Certificate pinning, is it good or not?
I mean, as I said, I'm not recent in this topic. I mean, the security posture of these applications today is, but when I was working with these applications, that was a hot topic, always TLS communication. And there was quite a lot of libraries doing certificate pinning. And just one mention that one of the biggest and most popular library that used certificate pinning was kind of suffering vulnerability where you could easily bypass the certificate pinning just giving an array containing the whole trust chain and also one extra that would you like to use. So actually you check the trust chain, okay, it's validated, everything, the certificate chain is trusted, and then let's check if the certificate is that what I'm expecting. Yes, it's yours, the APK certificate, so just connect. So these can happen. And of course, it's not a silver bullet, as we said, that there is no silver bullet. And there are definitely usability issues downside of the things that if you pin the certificate itself, then you have to maintain more frequently your application if the cert expires. And today's world, we are trying to even follow best practices where we don't issue certificates for 10 years now. We issue certificates for a year or even just shorter period of time from security perspective, of course. In this thing, I think there are use cases where it works to pin the certificate, definitely. Banking apps and other apps where we would like to more rely on the trust that we put into the application's maintainer. But in case of like applications where you cannot define where your application will connect, or there is lots of list of domains where you should connect, then it's even not feasible to pin your certificate, right? So if you cannot tell where the application will actually connect to, then you don't have to pin the certificate. And I believe it's an additional layer of security in terms of defense. It's a good security control. You should apply it if possible. Then if not, what you can do is just trust the certificate chain, and everything is relying on the trust. The trust will put in that chain.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would agree with Norby that the use cases is very important if you are thinking about implementing cert pinning.
Okay, so moving on with this attack then, because there are great stuff in here, even after this one. So where are we now? We can steal the communication between the client application and the server. Yeah, this could be exploited by attacking the reset password, or forget password flow. I think we already touched on the password side, and that's very regularly, I think, a weak link in the chain, the forget password flow. Well, N26 at this time implemented quite complicated and from face value quite good in a security sense steps to be able to reset the password. First of all, you had to pair the device. You had to know a form of a PIN code. It was, I think, called the transfer code, but anyway, it was a PIN. You had to know the login credentials. I think that's it. And
You have to have access to the SMS, I guess.
yeah, to get it, we will get to it. So you need to know these to reset the password, but you could broke the pairing. There are multiple ways to broke the pairing. To upper device, you could basically, it face value, you had to access the user's email account. You had to know the PIN that we said, ID that was printed in the actual physical card that the user had, and also the phone number, because there was an SMS notification, that's what you said. So these steps at face value again, it looks like it's quite secure. So as the presenter quite greatly said, there's no chance that they made a mistake in every step of this, right? Yeah, they have. So basically, some of the stuff like the ID printed in the card, that was used as a prefix for an ID for the user that was in the network communication. So you can get it even if that's supposed to be on the physical card. That was kind of nothing. The email. The email contained a link. That was the first step of the resetting flow. It contained a link that the user needed to actually call, but it was contained in the response for the request. So when the user started the forget password flow, the server kindly sent back the link that it would have been sent to the email, so you don't have to access the email either. The PIN, there was no brute force detection, basically. It was sent via SMS, but it was a 4-digit code, I think, with no brute force prevention, so it could have been brute force. I think which is a takeaway, at least for me, is here is that you need to think about these steps as a system, even though some of the steps seems like, okay, good, but you need to take the whole picture. But what's your opinions about this? For example, John Ward, I think you showed this example to me originally, so.
Absolutely, I love this talk. I highly recommend everyone to check it out because it's also significant entertaining value.
Yeah.
So seriously, so that talk is brilliant. So yeah, there's nothing much to add. I mean, there are lots of mistakes here, which were like blatantly obvious from the first day they drafted the pairing flow. So anyone who had any thoughts about security, they could have spotted these, but for some reason they don't, and that's, I think, brings us back to the very first question, the very first topic of this discussion, that they were just trying to rush as quickly as possible, and security, I think that was an afterthought, and that talk makes great fun of that.
Yeah. Tomasz, maybe from developer's point of view, how do you avoid such mistakes?
Well, I think one solution will be, because if I recall the video correctly, all these attacks were built on this root flaw that they can intercept the whole network traffic. So if there would have been a cert pinning there, then probably it would prevent the rest of the attacks.
Not all, I think. Not
No.
all.
No.
Why not?
Yeah, sorry. So the thing is that if you have a device and you root your Android phone and install, just take an Android 8.0 device, root it, or take a Genymotion image, root it, install the Exposed framework. And there's a module called SSL unpinning. If you install that, it will basically hook all the Java crypto functions which are responsible for certificate validation, and all of them will return as like it's a true certificate, so no problem there. So if it's your device, you cannot make sure. So this access to the network traffic was also feasible, even if they did implement certificate pinning.
Yes, but it requires access to the device. I think the root issue here was that without certificate pinning, if you have control of the network, even without having physical any access to the device, you could hijack the traffic. Because as you said, if you control even if you are able to install a different APK where you just remove that line from the certificate, or you just change the hash of the certificate into your man-in-the-middle server certificate, but still you need access to install an APK. I think the root flow here was that the attacker don't even need that. If they had a Wi-Fi, then they can control network traffic and set up their own DNS. Yeah. So that was, I think, the root flow of this. And as from developers' perspective, I think some of you mentioned that certificate expiration. I think for developers that's the most that's the highest concern here, because as you mentioned, you need to maintain the app. Yes, developers need to change these certificates, but the issue here is that if you release an app with one certificate and then infra team came and say, hey, we have a new certificate tomorrow, you need to add the new app version. Okay, but all your users will use the old version. How you would force them?
That's where automation and build pipelines came to the picture. So actually, you don't have to worry about changing the certificate because it can be automated. If you have a cert, let's encrypt for 1 day or for 2 days or even 1 year. If you have a build pipeline which actually builds your APK, it can just inject the right certificate which is at the point is valid. So you don't have to worry about certificate expiration. If it expires, there is a trigger which triggers a new build. The build creates a new APK or an IPA and just pushes into the store. And
it requires a really schedule.
And also when the new version reached the client
Yeah,
device.
actually that's the root problem here. So I would say today I don't think shouldn't be a problem updating an application like weekly or bi-weekly, because I'm
most of the time, yes, but
yes, I'm supposed to have this device always just go to Play Store and update all, and that's all. I don't worry about that application won't work anymore because I updated. Like
nice turned on, auto update is turned on by default.
Yeah, and
also Google is kind enough to provide you a big banner if you are not turning it on that you are bad and you should turn it off.
Yeah, so I think it's different because there is use cases. For example, if your desktop application, legacy kind of operating system and stuff, that you worry that I don't update my applications because that could break something and I won't be able to use. But I never experienced like this on my phone. Like there is a new version for the app and it's not usable or crashed. Of course, if crashed, then after a day or something, they will just fix the crash and you will receive the new update from the application. So I think today it shouldn't be a problem maintaining the application in an automated way where the short lifetime certificates will just kick a new build and kick a new version of the application.
There's an easier solution for that. Don't pin the leaf certificate, pin the CA.
Yeah, the CA.
Those guys have 10 years of expiry. So
yes, and what if they get compromised?
Yeah,
like
it
the
happened.
DigiNotar hack
Yes.
Yeah, there was like...
He's referring to a DigiNotar hack, if you haven't heard about it. Is it an Israeli or something?
It's a Dutch.
Dutch, okay. So it was a Dutch company, but the company itself, the root CA creator, how do you say that?
This
Authority.
certificate authority.
Authority, yeah, that's it. Thank you. So the certificate authority itself was hacked. So basically, all of the certificates issued by them was kind of invalid. So at least attackable. So attainable.
Yeah,
So
but
if
you know, I have a great argument for that. So the thing is that if you pin a certificate, you have to put your trust somewhere, either into your environment, where if you're a big enough bank, it's pretty likely the Chinese and the Russians and the North Koreans are already on there, or put it to a certificate authority where it's pretty likely they have a like a TPM based device in the basement with cards and stuff. So either way, they both can be broken, but I would place my money on the CA.
And then you wanted to say, I just wanted to highlight this, the university stuff that you mentioned. That I broke you. Sorry, broke your line of thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to mention that if you trust the certificate authority here, then you put your trust out from your out from your affection. Like if you work for a bank, or at least I recall my experience, they didn't like putting their trust out of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They trust themselves, even if there is a chance that Chinese and Russians in their bank, but they are more comfortable with this
Fair enough. There's
risk than doing that. So don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating for not certificate pinning. I just have experienced that when a product manager came and asked us how much time it would take to implement certificate pinning, and we will say like, well, to do it properly, I would say, I don't know, 4 weeks. And they ask, why 4 weeks? I just Googled, okay, HTTP, it's 2 lines to add the certificate pinning. And I would say yes, but what we will do with the expired certificates. And as you mentioned, with the pipeline stuff, you can release every minute a new version, but it has a very bad user experience. Like, imagine you buy a ticket on your phone for a train for tomorrow, and next day you go on a train where there's a limited network access, just a little bit, and it says that, oh, sorry, we can't log you out. You need to download the new app version with some fancy cross-platform thingy, 100 megabytes. So
Again,
it's not the best.
usability, yeah.
Yes. One thing I think to address that is to have such a release schedule when you are aware that certificates will expire, and you in advance include new certificates, and you have like a, I don't know, 3-month window when you support multiple certificates even before they will expire.
That works.
Yeah.
Blue-green deployments, A/B testing, stuff like these out there. So you can deploy at multiple environments. You can have just a set of users that they are applying this thing. So it can be solved today.
Yeah. I don't argue that. I just say that it's more complicated than just include 2 lines from the HTTP tutorial, like some product manager
Sure.
thing.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yes.
I think we can continue the discussion, but I would like to have a 5-minute break. So afterwards we are back.
I have just one question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead then.
So you mentioned like continuous releases is actually solving some of these short-lived certificate problems. So do you have any metrics of tracking your, app fragmentation through like store, or maybe iOS or App Store that supports this engineering mindset? Because what we see, some companies see with fragmentation of install base is that you might have like, okay, there is coming a certificate expiration, but then comes the app review process, and they will say, okay, now this cannot go live, and you have 2 weeks, and you are just holding the splinters,
Yeah, I totally agree. I understand the fragmentation is definitely a huge issue. It's not only against the automation and the continuous delivery and continuous release. It's I think the root cause of lots of problems, the fragmentation. We don't have any metrics. We even don't close to have these in place, this kind of automation, automated releases. It's just from a security perspective, I say that it shouldn't be a thing that we should be able to resolve, right? But we are still not there. So it's definitely, as we said, what we can do, we don't pin the actual certificate, we pin the CA or an intermediate CA, which makes us more exposed to attacks.
It's a different risk.
It's a different risk. Yeah. So that's what we can do today. And if you are brave enough and say that, okay, I'm the first one who will build the build pipeline will release automatically with really short-lived certificates, I would really love to see that in life and see how that works out.
Hashtag same. I just meant, that you had such,
I'm passionate about the CI/CD pipeline and automation.
So if you do that, please contact him. Norby. Please contact Norby if you do build such thing. Okay, then we will be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. So let's continue with maybe one of my favorites from the case studies, because it's not just or not really a security bug in its common sense, but quite an alarming situation nonetheless. So I don't know if you heard about this. I think it was last year maybe or 2 years ago. There was a bug both on Android itself and the Microsoft Teams app when you could not make emergency calls. And it's basically, if it's true, I don't know, I was not going after it, but if it's true according to Reddit post, because those are always true, so according to Reddit post, it was actually discovered, unfortunately, by someone trying to contact 911 in the US with a suspected stroke, so it's not really fun at all. And their Pixel phone was crashing, so it was not being able to make that call. And it turned out there was both a bug in the Teams application and also Android itself, as I mentioned earlier. And basically, what happened in the gist is that the Teams application could make phone calls. It could basically use the Skype backend or make actual phone calls. So it registered itself as a telephony service with Android. But developers thought it would be a good idea that if you are not signing into Teams, every time you start the app, you register it as a telephony service. So basically, a new instance was created. So if you kept starting up the application, there was more and more and more of these services created. And when the phone wanted to make an emergency call, it basically looks through all of these services, even if that service was not being able to make an emergency call, as Teams was not, but still, it was a telephony service. And it wanted to sort these services. And there were multiple data that was checked when sorting, and one of them, the last one, if all else failed, if all of the other things were all of the other things were the same, like in Teams case, everything else, the data was the same. It checked the hash of that instance, and it was a bug there. The comparison actually, it was the two hashes were subtracted from each other, and it caused an integer underflow or overflow issue. That caused the crash. It had to be a very unfortunate, chain of events of starting the application, making a lot of these instances, and also having the underflow issue there when making the call. But what can this tell us? Do we need to think about this? Maybe this harpoons or goes into the performance side of things, because nowadays you can easily say that, oh, it won't be a problem that registering every time a new telephone service, the hardware can make it. So what does tell us in your perspective? Maybe start with Tomáš from the development side.
Well, I'm not that deeply familiar with this issue, but in general, I think in Android, when you handle these APIs, there are usually two ways. One is to statically register your app, for instance, as a phone app, and you do this via the manifest. And there are other ways to register your app from your code. And if you fire up any you check any documentation or any tutorial, anything, they would probably start with the static manifest-based solution. However, in most of the cases, practically, you would need the one that you start and stop yourself. Like one good example is, for instance, Firebase Cloud Messaging. By default, it's enabled every time you start your app, even if your user is logged out from the app. So you need to actually add a different manifest tag to turn off this auto start and then start manually. So I think it's the tooling could improve here, and the documentation could help if they would promote the registration of and unregistration of this from code, and point this out that you might not want to have this enabled all the time, just when the user is authenticated. For instance, in this case, if they would only start and stop it when the user is authenticated, it could be actually a viable situation that, for instance, you have no SIM card in your phone, but you can use your Skype account to actually call 911. It's a valid use case.
It was not able to call 911, by the way. It was just a bug in Android that it queried through all of the telephony services, not just the ones that call. But I get what you mean.
Yeah. So
It can be a valid use case for
yes, to call a emergency via a different phone app. The issue here was, I think that, or one of the issues here was that they started or registered the app as a call dialer app, even when the user was not logged in.
And from what I asked about the performance perspective, do you as a developer worry about this kind of stuff when you are saying, I can be lazy and just do stuff again and again and again because the device can take it? Or do you scrutinize your code or improve recursive use? How do you do this? So performance-wise?
I think such issues like that whether or not you enable or disable stuff, these quickly arise if you have automated tests. Because for automated tests, you probably need to restart such stuff or stop, do something, and then start it again, and it would arise that you just can't live with something always turned on.
Yeah, because I see regularly sometimes so to have some, like closables not closing or things like that. But it can be a similar topic. But let's get back to the actual incident or issue here. Who wants to add something for this? Any thoughts?
So I cannot, but I will probably hijack your original topic because
Feel free.
what I'd like to talk about is even if you're security conscious and you build your application with best-in-class security, these things will happen. If someone says that they don't have a security issue in their app, they don't know. No, probably they don't know that they have, or they are lying. Yeah. So I think this is the thing where it's really important to have actually a registry of the issues that you have, and set the severity to the right place. And this is how you can actually immediately react on an issue if it's a critical issue. And right now, actually, there are people. I mean, lives are in danger. So this is something which is really critical, and everyone has to actually jump on it and work on it. And these things will happen. And in the other hand, if an issue is just a minor issue, then yeah, you can go forward, do your regular thing, and maybe in a few weeks when you have time, you can actually fix the issue. But yeah, it's really important how you actually react to a critical issue, I think, because you cannot actually, these things will happen.
I can imagine the developer's thoughts or chain of thoughts saying that basically I'm working on Teams, so no knife can harm. How much can I make, right? Oh.
It even has a possibility that those who were working on that code had encountered this exceptional case, like when you would like to start a call coming from such an intent, and you would like to use the user token, and it's null. And what to do in this case? If they would have a alerting system when they can log it, and there it would, for instance, we have such a logging system that uploads such odd cases, and we got a Slack notification if something that shouldn't happen actually happens. It's not just for security, but
I think everyone's seen a catch block where it says this should never happen.
Yeah, it's just a comment and nothing else there. But if they would have like a log for this, that this shouldn't happen, that I just received an intent for caller and the user is null, and that they would monitor it, then they would catch it even before this thing happened, because the chance that others had the same issue, it just was not that severe, and they didn't report it.
Yeah, good call out. John, any thoughts on this?
It's a cool bug, but I wouldn't particularly refer to it as a vulnerability. So as the guy said, these things will happen. I mean, just an unfortunate cooperation between two applications where the bugs just intertwine. So I wouldn't consider this as a serious problem. I mean, yeah.
I would ask the person with the stroke, but
fair enough. But fortunately they had a landline. So they were able to call 911. So the story has a happy ending.
Ah, I didn't know that. Thank you.
So yeah, so that's the thing. So these kind of problems will appear, and the funny thing is that I think no testing could possibly catch this.
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
not even the UPass.
Prepare for unexpected. No, you cannot, prepare yourself for everything. You can prepare for some things. What we can do actually is monitoring like these events. Like we expecting that sometimes can happen something weird, which causes lots of services kick off.
Sunburst, yeah.
So some burst, and if your operating system, your platform is prepared for that kind of event, that could prevent these kind of events to interchaining and ending up in the way that it ended up. So yeah, I think the best thing that you can do, having these monitoring and action in place for unexpected events and act on it as soon as possible.
Yeah, great suggestion, I think. So let's get to an actual security incident. It was quite a long time ago, but why I included this is that I think it's quite demonstrative on how, it was already mentioned, I think, by you, about the platform evolving and also throwing a wrench at you sometimes. So it was WhatsApp, and right around the time when Facebook acquired WhatsApp. As you know, it's a messaging service, supposed to be end-to-end encrypted, but end-to-end has ends. It ends on your device, so you need to have something there as well. And in 2014, WhatsApp just stored the messages on the SD card. And at that time, SD card was quite easily accessible by an application. They just needed to say that they need access, and I think all users just said, yeah, of course, sure, go ahead. And there was not even as far as I remember, there was not even a good security control to limit this access. It was just access everything or not. And if the application needed access to play some files, for example, then they could access it. Of course, now Google has much better security controls. I'm talking mostly about scope storage, which basically allows the user to only let the apps access certain folders or certain parts of the application, like media or something. But what does it do? What do you think? Mario, go ahead.
It's a good example of learning from your mistakes, I think. So eventually you put some features right there. So SD card is a good idea to have a shared storage, and you will see that how people will use it, and you will realize that people think that it's something that is private. No, it's not private, and somehow I should, prevent these users from themselves. That's a lesson curve that they needed to have, I think.
Yeah. So Mario, I haven't heard your voice for a while. So
Yeah, I would say that they did not fully understand what end-to-end encryption means, and that's where they failed. And
you mean WhatsApp, right?
yeah, definitely. And yeah, isn't this the first thing you check? Like, is it encrypted on your end, and then it gets sent, it's encrypted, and at the where it was sent, it's also encrypted. Like, I'm failing to see how this was missed.
Great design, right?
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's the consensus that if something gets out of your application's control, then you don't want to have it unencrypted. And I think you mentioned scoped storage. Yes, it mitigates the issue, but the real solution or one of the things that would prevent it would be that if they encrypt the data. For instance, we even encrypt data that saved to shared preferences, which is in the internal storage of the app.
App sandbox. So actually just
yes.
available to the app only.
Yes. So even that, and I think developers should consider everything that is outside the app's runtime control.
Because you have root and you can access that supposed to be private space as well.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah. So even networking, writing to your SD card, I would in some cases even consider saved instance state as a security risk, because I guess many of you had an app that has a password field somewhere, an edit text, and chances that it has an ID on that to position it in a constraint layout, for instance, is also high. It means that the content of this password edit text, it gets saved, when the application process is killed. And we are at the situation where your app is not running, you don't control where this data is, and the password of the user is potentially somewhere. If I would ask you that what the OS does with that, does the OS write this to the disk? I wouldn't be confident to tell that they don't.
That's an interesting call. Jean-Paul, any experience with this?
Yeah. So
Or any considerations with storage?
yeah. So no, the thing is that there were like periods of time, like when there were the good old days, when you had the basic Java crypto API. So developers were super creative in terms of how to secure data, how to find out different ways to use encryption, how to generate keys. There's loads of different functions which return kind of random values in the Java API. 99% of those, they are not suitable for cryptographic use. So so yeah, that's the main thing here. So that when you rely on crypto, in my experience, then you are probably trying to solve the wrong problem. If you're trying to use some custom crypto to do something which either shouldn't be there in the first place and should be protected this way, or you're probably neglecting existing Android features, or you're probably have some serious miscalculations in your threat landscape, and you're then desperately trying to patch missing issues there. So as things stand, I usually recommend against using any kind of crypto as such. I mean, in the Jetpack API, we have now encrypted chat paths, encrypted files, and whatnot. And even though you can shoot yourself in the leg with creating a string and use that string as a password, or not a password, as an encryption key for your encrypted file, which essentially kind of nullifies the whole thing. So instead, if you're running on the proper device, use the trusted execution environment, and you can. Yeah. So in the recent revisions of Android, and Google actually learned a lot from Apple. So there, and I kid you not, the way they use the Secure Enclave, that's brilliant from a cryptographic point of view. So your application can tie local data storage and local authentication together in a trusted environment. So in this way, if you use the encrypted chat paths or the encrypted file API, you can use it in a way that it uses the crypto chip, which enforces biometric authentication, and that's nothing that your application does. It just asks for an encryption key, and the environment will pop that prompt for the user. And if the user somehow fails the biometric encryption, then the app won't work. And I think that's the good answer for these questions. So there's not much talking about that. So any other option, any other solution will have its Achilles heel.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a little bit of time for questions. So if anyone has a question, shoot. Okay. Otherwise, we are already over. So, but thank you for your patience, and I really hope that the discussion worth it. So I would like to close up. First, I would like to thank the wonderful panelists. First of all, Norbert Baliga. Adam Dospad, Mario Kada, Tamás Balog, and last but not least, Zsombor Kovács. Okay, then I would like to thank as well LastPass and GoTo for sponsoring the event. LastPass for the delicious food. You know, if you have to store your password, go to LastPass. And yes, it's almost too much joke, but if you want to use tools for collaboration and communication, and or remote access and support, then go to GoTo. Yeah, of course. Thank you. We were Andrei Budapest. I was Balázs Gerlei, and we will be back soon. I don't know when, but around November, I expect the next event. And also, we will also join up again with Android Worldwide for the online event, but hopefully we will have more in-person events as well. Hope you had a great time, and if you have a little bit of time, you can stay around for a while, but thank you for your attention again. forget to introduce my co-organizer, Martin Brown. I know that's not why you came up to the stage, but still, so please have a welcome for Martin Brown. You can thank for him for the recording and also all the tech stuff from it.
Sure. So I just wanted to grab the mic figuratively to thank Balázs for not only moderating and hosting most of this, but also organizing all of these wonderful panelists here. So thank you for all the work.
And also one last shout out for the third co-organizer of Under Budapest, who unfortunately could not be here, but nonetheless, Gábor Váradi, we couldn't work without him. So shout out to him and also all of those. Thank you and see you next time.